the reason why I'm so engaged in foreign policy is because I grew up during the Iraq War. I followed and we've seen some shit. I'm sure Glenn's seen much worse. And everyone who's seen a lot of shit, people like Mark, Kimberly, Glenn, like people have been in this game for a long time saying that we never seen slaughters like this. And this is what with us having the full knowledge of what went on in Yemen and Iraq, for example. You guys see this? Like the per day stat, and I mentioned this when we were talking about the journalist that was killed here very soon, where you had Israel killed 67 journalists in 50 days. That's more than the entirety of World War II, the entirety of the Vietnam War. They already killed more journalists. You got 136 children killed per day already. So yes, there was a lot of people killed in Iraq, a lot of people killed in Yemen, but the pace in which we are seeing this slaughtered is unprecedented in modern human history. Like, this is unbelievable. Now, you also have this that I wanted to share as well. I kind of covered this as well yesterday. Anyone who believes the lie that Israel is going after Hamas, you either have to be the biggest youthful idiot in the world, or you have to acknowledge that the Israeli military, the least efficient army, the least costly army in human history, either one of those two. And they usually spin it as the exact opposite. They said Israel is the most cautious, the most pro-civilian army. So I don't believe these numbers for 1 second, because Israel's been known to inflate the amount of Hamas fighters that have been killed. So for the record, I don't believe these numbers. But let's do it both ways, CJs. Let's believe the numbers they claim. Let's say they killed 1,000 to 2,000 Hamas fighters, which I absolutely don't believe. But let's say they did. You guys understand, with the thousands of children killed, around 20,000 probably dead. This is a civilian death rate of around 95%. In what war, in what conflict is this ever acceptable? And at what point do we stop believing Israel at face value when they say they're at war with Hamas, when they got a 95% at least civilian death rate, and that's using their numbers? CJ and Glenn.
Let me just interject one thing quickly there.
Go ahead.
Look at this math. So the stated goal of Israel is to destroy Hamas, to eliminate it from Gaza, and to eradicate it, not to weaken it, not to degrade it. They've been very clear about this. In fact, they've said it's not to weaken it, it's not to undermine it, it's not to erode it. It's to destroy it entirely, to make sure there's no Hamas left in Gaza. So the question then becomes, well, how do you do that? What does that mean? At a bare minimum, it presumably means that you want to go and kill all the people that you believe are Hamas militants who work as part of Hamas, who are fighters for Hamas, or part of the government anyway. So if you take these figures at face value, which, as you said, come from Israel, these are Israeli military estimates.
Yep.
They've killed, they say, between 1,000 and 2,000 Hamas fighters thus far. And they say there are 30,000 Hamas fighters total. So this means that they have killed 1/15 of all Hamas fighters. And the price for this so far is, let's be generous again and call it 15 rather than 20,000 deaths. Sure. At this rate of civilian death, meaning 14 civilians for every one Hamas militant, this is going to mean that if you're going to kill the next 28,000 Hamas militants, the military force of Hamas, you have 28,000 more to go. At the rate that you're killing, you're going to end up multiplying by a factor of 15 the number of civilian deaths that have already happened, which is 15,000. So you're talking about something that is approaching 200,000, if not actually exceeding it, starting to approach 300,000. And if you're going to have a war that kills several 100,000 people out of a population of 2.2 million, I won't even engage in debates any longer about whether the word genocide is appropriate. I don't know what else to compare that to.
What else is?
In terms of, just look at the math.
And that's my logic I use. If my radical ass, well, I say if you guys don't believe Hamas and Palestinians have the right to armed resistance, who does? What standard are you guys allowing the ruling class to set for armed resistance? And I don't engage in the oppression Olympics. I believe counterproductive to see who more oppressed, indigenous Americans, Palestinians, black. That's counterproductive. It really doesn't matter, right? But if you don't believe the Palestinians have the right to fight against oppressive governments, you're essentially saying no one does. You're essentially.
Well, look, can I interject there too? Because it is true that there are a lot of Palestinians who do not identify with Hamas, who don't like Hamas. Yeah. When Hamas was elected in 2005, they got 44% of the vote. The more moderate Fatah party got 41% of the vote. So there have been efforts on the part of Palestinian civic society to organize nonviolent protests to end the occupation. So what were those things? One time they wanted to have a symbolic march in front of the gate, the thing that keeps them imprisoned inside Gaza. And as they approached the gate, the Israelis gunned them down, even though they were nonviolent. But the most significant tactic they've been trying to use is a boycott of Israel. Yes. Don't buy, modeled after the boycott that helped bring down the apartheid regime in South Africa in the 1980s when the United States was supporting that. I just watched this farewell party that Ronald Reagan gave for Pat Buchanan when he was leaving the White House in 1987. He praised Reagan's courage and listed a bunch of things Reagan did, one of which was sanctioning or vetoing a sanctions bill that the U.S. Congress had enacted to impose on South Africa to help weaken the apartheid regime, with which, of course, both the United States and Israel was allied. But what they tried, and they're still trying, this nonviolent means of protesting against this oppression, which is, let's have a boycott of Israel modeled after the one in South Africa. And what did the West do in response? They enacted laws saying that the boycott of Israel is inherently anti-Semitic. And because it's anti-Semitic in the West, it is illegal. You cannot advocate for it. You cannot organize around it. And in the United States, where at least we have the First Amendment, they've tried circumventing that by enacting laws saying that if you want to work for the state, you have to sign a pledge vowing that you do not support a boycott of Israel. So the Palestinians have tried nonviolent means and still are doing so. And the West made it illegal for the world to participate. So leaving them, in essence, with nothing but a violent response, and all these like people on the right who love to, venerate these old virtues of masculinity and who talk about the importance of nationalism. What would other people do? Anyone in the world who would tolerate decades of occupation, humiliating, brutal occupation, and a blockade of their country by a foreign army, and not at some point revolt against it? Which group of people would do that? And I think that's the key point is, of course, when a country is invading your land and occupying it, as the Israelis are doing, nobody would argue that armed resistance against that occupying force is unjust. And a lot of the people being released are people who used violence against IDF soldiers occupying their land. But even beyond that, before you even get to violent resistance, they've had nonviolent resistance, all of which the West has declared off limits and inappropriate, and so anti-Semitic, in fact. So there's whatever option the Palestinians try and use to win their sovereignty or their freedom or their self-governance, the West pronounces that it's inappropriate.
All of what we're all describing and what you're talking about, Glenn, sounds like a colonial settler project to me. So when people say, like, oh, well, they're not killing civilians, they're trying not killing to kill civilians. What if the point is to kill civilians? That is the point, to kill civilians, ethnic cleansing. Because if you're a colonial settler project, how you want these people gone, however, whether by death or whether you have them escape up to Egypt or some other Arab country, the point is to get them out of here by any means. And that's also and also to speak to the death toll of children when they say they're indiscriminately killing children. To me, the inability not to have so many child deaths, to me, also speaks to that this is a colonial settler project, because what does killing children mean to a colonial settler project? It means no future for the population that you're trying to displace, kill, or replace.